They mocked the fragile human until the apex predator named her the Silent Fang. Helios Bastion stretched across space like a metallic city, the meeting point for 12 alien species. Evelyn Hart watched through her shuttle's viewport as the massive station grew larger. At 29, she was small even by human standards. 1.68 meters tall, with brown hair and determined green eyes that studied everything with a predator behaviorist's analytical mind. "Final approach to Helios Bastion," announced the automated pilot. Evelyn checked her datapad one final time. The files contained everything humanity knew about the Kethmori apex predators that had terrorized this sector for 2 centuries. Every military force sent against them had been destroyed. Every diplomatic mission had ended in silence. Now, with the Galactic War raging against an unknown enemy, the desperate coalition needed the Kethmori's strength. The shuttle bay opened, revealing a cavernous space designed for beings far larger than humans. Evelyn stepped onto the deck, immediately feeling the weight of alien scrutiny. Towering forms turned to stare at her small frame. Commander Tharok Vel, a massive Vraxian warrior with gray scales and yellow eyes, watched her approach with amusement. "The humans send us a child to face the Kethmori." Dr. Lyrix Quen's crystalline form shimmered as she approached her 2.5-meter frame, pulsing with internal light. "They were supposed to send a warrior, not a research assistant," she chimed. Near the wall, Roth Moran, a scarred Gorian berserker whose bulk dwarfed even the Vraxians, laughed like an avalanche. "Look how it walks, so careful, so precise, like prey, trying not to attract attention." The central corridor stretched before her like a canyon. Evelyn walked steadily through the gauntlet of stairs and whispers. She reached the conference room where representatives sat around a circular table. Her assigned seat looked almost comical, a small chair resembling child's furniture next to the massive alien seats. Commander Tharok rose to his full height. "So," he rumbled, "Earth has finally sent us their champion. Tell me, human, did your species run out of adults?" Laughter echoed around the room. Even diplomatic species couldn't hide their amusement at this tiny creature chosen to contact the most feared predators in space. Evelyn placed her hands flat on the table, waiting for the laughter to subside. "My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm here as humanity's representative to establish contact with the Kethmori." Dr. Lyrix's crystalline form flickered with amusement. "The Kethmori are apex predators of this entire sector. They've destroyed every military force that approached their world. Their claws can cut through starship hulls. And Earth sends us a creature that hunts with tools because it has no natural weapons." Commander Tharok leaned forward. "The Kethmori have been silent for 200 years. The last contact attempt ended with the crew sent back in pieces. What makes you think a human can succeed where warriors have failed?" Evelyn pulled out her datapad and activated a holographic display. Surveillance footage of the Kethmori appeared terrifying creatures standing 3 meters tall with 6 limbs ending in razor claws. Their black carapaces absorbed light as they moved like living shadows. "Look at them hunt," Evelyn said quietly. The footage showed Kethmori pursuing prey across crystal plains. But the aliens began noticing what Evelyn had seen in hundreds of hours of study. The Kethmori didn't attack blindly. They coordinated with sophisticated intelligence. One group drove prey toward a canyon, while others waited in ambush. They communicated with subtle signals and killed cleanly. "They're not mindless killers," Evelyn explained. "They're intelligent hunters with complex social structures. See how smaller ones eat first. They care for their young and weak. These aren't monsters. They're a sophisticated predator species with culture and values. Maybe previous attempts failed because we didn't understand what the Kethmori value. Most protocols focus on showing strength or offering gifts. What if they respect something else entirely? Understanding. The ability to hunt, survive, think like a predator." Roth Moran burst into laughter. "The tiny human thinks it understands predators better than us. Your species couldn't catch a sick animal without tools. Your prey pretending to be hunters." Evelyn waited calmly. "You're right. Humans aren't built like natural predators. We don't have claws or fangs. But we survived on a world full of creatures bigger and stronger than us. We became dominant through persistence and intelligence. We learned to hunt by thinking, not just being strong." The communications array suddenly activated. A single Kethmori warrior appeared on screen standing on a crystal outcropping. The creature's 6 red eyes glowed like stars. When it spoke, its voice was grinding stone mixed with thunder. "We hear you, sky dwellers. We know you watch us from above. If you wish to prove your worth, send one among you to face the trial of strength, one hunter alone to walk our lands, and show us what manner of predator dares disturb our world." The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence. Commander Tharok was first to recover. "A trial of strength. I'll prepare my best warriors for immediate deployment." "No," Evelyn said quietly. The word cut through the room like a blade. Every alien turned to stare at the small human who had just contradicted one of the galaxy's most formidable military commanders. The laughter that followed was the loudest yet. "The human wants to commit suicide," wheezed Rothmarin. "At least it will be quick. The Kethmori will probably eat her in one bite." Dr. Marcus Reed, the only other human in the room, moved behind her chair. "Evelyn, this is insane. These creatures move faster than our eyes can track. Their claws can cut through starship armor. What could you possibly do against something like that? Maybe I can't offer them strength, but I can offer them something else they might value. The mind of a hunter who thinks instead of just attacking." Commander Tharok's amusement faded. "When the Kethmori speak of strength, they mean real strength, physical power, combat ability. You're a tiny creature from a weak species that needs tools to hunt rabbits. What could you possibly offer them?" Evelyn pulled up more files. "The opportunity to see a different kind of hunting, a kind they've never encountered before." Detailed scans of Valdris Prime filled the display. "The crystal formations create natural shelters. The atmospheric density is perfect for human lungs. We evolved in similar conditions. The gravity is only 1.3 times standard." Dr. Lyrix's crystal body dimmed. "Even if environmental factors are survivable, you're talking about facing the Kethmori themselves. A single warrior could tear through a squad of Vraxian Marines." "That's why I won't fight them," Evelyn said simply. The room erupted in confusion. "Not fight them?" Rothmarin's scarred face twisted. "Then what's the point?" Evelyn activated more footage. "Look at their hunting patterns again. They're not random killers. They show restraint strategy, even honor codes. What if the trial isn't about proving you can kill, but proving you can hunt with intelligence?" The debate continued for hours. Nobody took Evelyn's offer seriously, except as a topic for more jokes. 2 days later, Evelyn stood in the shuttle bay checking her minimal equipment. She wore simple clothing, carried basic survival gear, and had a small medical kit. No weapons, no advanced technology, no communication devices. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe found her there, her face tight with worry. The council voted to send a joint team of Vraxian and Gorian warriors down first. "That's exactly the wrong approach," Evelyn said. "The Kethmori aren't going to be intimidated by a show of force. They'll see a group of warriors as either a threat to eliminate or prey to hunt." "So you're just going to steal a shuttle and fly down there alone?" Evelyn smiled for the first time since arriving. "I prefer to think of it as taking initiative." The shuttle systems were designed for larger beings, but Evelyn had learned to operate them. As the craft detached from Helios Bastion, she could imagine the chaos erupting in the command center. Valdris Prime's surface rushed up to meet her. Crystal formations created a maze of glittering spires and deep valleys. 3 suns cast confusing shadows across the alien terrain. Evelyn set the shuttle down between 2 crystal walls. The moment she stepped outside, she knew she was being watched. The air was thin but breathable. The gravity made each step slightly heavier than normal. 3 suns hung at different points in the sky, creating complex light patterns. She had studied the probe footage carefully. The way crystal formations had been worn smooth suggested large creatures passed regularly. Scratch marks showed where claws had tested their sharpness, most telling the area was completely silent except for wind through crystals. On a world full of predators, silence meant something dangerous was near. Evelyn started walking, keeping to shadows cast by crystal spires. Her plan was simple: survive long enough to prove humans understood hunting even if they practiced it differently. The attack came sooner than expected. Creatures that burst from concealment looked like wolves made of living metal. Their fangs gleamed silver, their eyes burned with predatory intelligence. 8 of them spread out to surround her with practiced precision. These weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent predators working together. Evelyn didn't run. Running would trigger chase instincts and guarantee death. Instead, she backed slowly toward a narrow gap between crystal formations. The pack leader, massive and scarred, growled low. It was testing her, trying to provoke panic. Evelyn met its gaze steadily and continued her retreat. The gap was just wide enough for one human, too narrow for larger predators. As the pack closed in, Evelyn slipped between crystal walls and found herself in a maze of narrow passages. The real hunt began. The metal wolves couldn't follow directly, but they were smart enough to split up and find alternative routes. Evelyn used her smaller size to advantage, crawling through gaps impossible for larger creatures climbing crystal faces that couldn't support more weight. But she wasn't just running. Every turn, every path was part of a larger strategy. She was leading the pack somewhere specific toward a section where probe data had shown a particular formation. It took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering, but finally Evelyn reached her destination. A cluster of crystals had formed a bowl-shaped depression with only one narrow entrance. The pack leader appeared at the entrance, bristling with rage. It had followed her trail, thinking it had cornered its prey. Within moments, all 8 predators had gathered at the narrow entrance. Evelyn picked up a perfectly balanced piece of crystal that had broken off from formations above. She hurled it with all her strength at a specific point on the crystal wall above the entrance. The sound rang like a bell. Then, with a grinding roar, the entire wall came tumbling down. The shuttle systems were designed for beings larger than humans, but Evelyn had spent the past 2 days learning to operate them. As the small craft detached from Helios Bastion, she could imagine the chaos erupting in the command center. By the time they realized what she was doing, she would already be entering Valdris Prime's atmosphere. Dr. Marcus Reed's voice crackled through the emergency communication channel. "Evelyn, you need to abort this mission immediately. The Council is sending military forces to intercept you." "Tell them I'll be fine," Evelyn replied, adjusting the shuttle's trajectory toward the crystal planet below. "And Marcus, make sure they know this is humanity's choice, not the Council's." The planet's surface rushed up to meet her faster than expected. The crystal formations that covered much of the landscape created a labyrinth of sharp, glittering spires and deep valleys. Valdris Prime's 3 suns cast confusing shadows that shifted and danced across the alien terrain. Evelyn set the shuttle down in a relatively flat area between 2 towering crystal walls, hoping the formation would provide some concealment. The moment she stepped outside, she knew she was being watched. The air was thin but breathable, just as her research had suggested. The gravity made each step slightly heavier than normal, but not impossibly so. 3 suns hung at different points in the alien sky, creating a complex pattern of light and shadow that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. She had studied the probe footage carefully enough to recognize the signs. The way some of the crystal formations had been worn smooth suggested that large creatures passed by them regularly. Scratch marks on the harder surfaces showed where claws had tested their sharpness against the alien stone. Most telling of all, the area was completely silent except for the whisper of wind through the crystals. On a world full of predators, silence meant something very dangerous was near. Evelyn started walking, keeping to the shadows cast by the crystal spires. Her plan was simple: survive long enough to prove that humans understood the art of hunting, even if they practiced it differently than other species. Every step had to be deliberate. Every choice had to demonstrate intelligence and restraint. Unknown to her, Lieutenant Sarah Monroe had made a decision that would change everything. Against direct orders, Sarah had followed Evelyn's shuttle in a smaller reconnaissance craft. The young logistics officer had spent months studying Kethmori behavior patterns alongside Evelyn, and she couldn't bear the thought of her friend facing the apex predators alone. Sarah's shuttle touched down several kilometers away, hidden in a deep crystal canyon. She carried emergency medical supplies and a portable shield generator, just enough equipment to help if Evelyn got into serious trouble. The attack came sooner than either human expected. The creatures that burst from concealment behind a cluster of crystals looked like wolves, but wolves made of living metal and pure predatory instinct. Their fangs gleamed silver in the triple sunlight, and their eyes burned with an intelligence that spoke of sophisticated pack-hunting strategies. There were 8 of them, and they spread out to surround Evelyn with practiced precision. These weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent predators working together to bring down what they perceived as easy prey. Evelyn didn't run. Running would trigger their chase instincts and guarantee her death. Instead, she backed slowly toward a narrow gap between two crystal formations, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. The pack leader, a massive creature with scars across its metallic hide, growled low in its throat. It was testing her, trying to provoke her into panicking. Evelyn met its gaze steadily and continued her slow retreat. The gap between the crystals was just wide enough for one human, but too narrow for the larger predators. As the pack closed in, Evelyn slipped between the crystal walls and found herself in a maze of narrow passages. From her hidden position, Sarah Monroe watched through binoculars as Evelyn disappeared into the crystal labyrinth. The pack of metal wolves split up, circling the formation to find alternative routes through the maze. "This is madness," Sarah whispered to herself. "She's going to get herself killed." The real hunt began as the metal wolves used their intelligence to outmaneuver what they saw as trapped prey. They couldn't follow Evelyn directly through the narrow passages, but they were smart enough to coordinate their search, trying to drive her toward open areas where their superior speed and strength would be decisive. Evelyn used her smaller size to advantage, crawling through gaps that would be impossible for larger creatures climbing up crystal faces that couldn't support more weight. But she wasn't just running. Every turn she made, every path she chose was part of a larger strategy. She was leading the pack somewhere specific toward a section of the crystal maze where the probe data had shown a particular formation. A cluster of crystals that had grown together to form a bowl-shaped depression with only one narrow entrance. It took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering, but finally Evelyn reached her destination. The pack leader appeared at the entrance moments later, its metallic fur bristling with frustrated rage. It had followed Evelyn's trail through the maze, probably thinking it had cornered its prey at last. Evelyn stood at the far end of the crystal bowl, apparently trapped. The pack leader growled in satisfaction and called to its companions. Within moments, all 8 predators had gathered at the narrow entrance. That was when Evelyn picked up the rock she had noticed during her earlier study of the probe data, a perfectly balanced piece of crystal that had broken off from the formations above. She hurled it with all her strength at a specific point on the crystal wall above the entrance. The sound of crystal hitting crystal rang through the air like a bell. Then, with a grinding roar, the entire wall came tumbling down. The avalanche of crystal shards blocked the entrance completely, but it also triggered something neither Evelyn nor the watching Kethmori had expected. The vibrations from the rockfall destabilized other formations throughout the area. A massive crystal spire, already weakened by centuries of thermal stress, began to topple directly toward Evelyn's position. From her hidden vantage point, Sarah Monroe saw the danger immediately. Without thinking, she broke cover and sprinted toward the crystal bowl, carrying a portable emergency beacon that could generate a powerful electromagnetic pulse. "Evelyn!" Sarah's voice echoed across the crystal landscape as she ran. The falling spire was enormous, hundreds of tons of razor-sharp crystal that would crush everything in the bowl when it hit. Evelyn looked up and realized she had nowhere to run. The fallen rocks blocked the only exit, and the walls were too high to climb before the spire came down. Sarah reached the edge of the bowl, just as the massive crystal began its final descent. Without hesitation, she activated the emergency beacon and hurled it into the center of the depression. The electromagnetic pulse that followed was designed to disable electronic equipment, but it had an unexpected effect on the crystalline formations. The pulse resonated through the crystal matrix, creating a harmonic frequency that shattered the falling spire into thousands of smaller fragments. Instead of being crushed by a single massive impact, Evelyn found herself pelted by a rain of crystal dust and small fragments. Painful, but not fatal. But the electromagnetic pulse had also attracted unwanted attention. The beacon's signal was detected by every sensor on Valdris Prime, including those of the Kethmori. Within minutes, the air filled with the sound of approaching movement, not the pack of metal wolves, but something far more dangerous. A Kethmori warrior descended from crystal formations above, moving with impossible grace despite its enormous size. Nearly 3 meters tall, with 6 limbs ending in claws that could slice through starship armor, it was everything the surveillance footage had suggested, and more. Sarah stood at the edge of the crystal bowl, her breathing apparatus damaged by fragments, her portable shield generator sparking and failing. She looked at Evelyn with eyes full of determination and regret. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quietly. "I couldn't let you face them alone." The Kethmori warrior's 6 red eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory interest. It moved toward her with fluid, terrifying grace. "Evelyn," Sarah said, her voice carrying with unnatural clarity. "You are humanity's last hope. Show them what we really are." She detonated her remaining equipment. The explosion wasn't large enough to seriously harm the Kethmori warrior, but it created a massive cloud of crystal dust and electromagnetic interference. When the dust settled, Sarah Monroe was gone. Only a small crater remained where she had made her final stand. Evelyn stood alone in the crystal bowl, staring at the place where her friend had sacrificed herself. Tears mixed with crystal dust on her face as the full weight of what had happened settled in her mind. The Kethmori warrior stood motionless at the edge of the bowl, its alien features unreadable. But something in its posture suggested that it too understood what it had witnessed. This wasn't just another failed contact attempt. This was something unprecedented, one pack animal sacrificing itself for another, even though they weren't related by blood or pack bonds. This kind of behavior spoke of something the Kethmori had never encountered before, a species that valued something more than individual survival. The silence that followed Sarah's sacrifice stretched across the crystal landscape. Evelyn stood motionless, hands clenched into fists, as she stared at the crater where her friend had made her final stand. The Kethmori warrior remained at the edge of the formation, its 6 red eyes studying her with intensity that felt like physical weight. High above, other Kethmori had gathered to observe this unprecedented encounter. They moved like shadows across glittering formations, their black carapaces reflecting light in patterns that spoke of complex communication. The warrior that had witnessed Sarah's sacrifice was Kalor, the Fang bearer, one of the most respected hunters in Kethmori society. For over 200 years, he had observed the sky dwellers from afar, watching their clumsy attempts at contact with growing disdain. They always came with weapons or technology, thinking displays of force would impress apex predators. But this was different. Kalor had watched the small human lead the metal wolves into a trap using nothing but intelligence and terrain awareness. He had seen her choose not to kill when she had the opportunity, and now he had witnessed something that challenged everything the Kethmori thought they knew about other species. The second human had sacrificed herself for the first, even though it gained her nothing. Even though the first human wasn't even injured or truly threatened at that moment. She had seen a potential danger and chosen to eliminate it at the cost of her own life. This kind of behavior spoke of pack bonds stronger than blood of intelligence that transcended individual survival instincts. The Kethmori had complex social structures and understood sacrifice for the good of the hunt, but they had never imagined that prey species might possess similar values. Evelyn slowly raised her head and looked directly at Kalor. Tears had cut clean tracks through the crystal dust on her face, but her green eyes burned with determination rather than fear. "I know you can understand me," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the crystal bowl with surprising clarity. "You've been watching us for years, learning our languages, studying our behavior. You know what just happened here." Kalor said nothing, but his head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have indicated interest or confusion. "She didn't have to do that," Evelyn continued, her voice growing stronger. "Sarah Monroe was a logistics officer, not a warrior. She could have stayed safe on the station and watched from a distance. But she followed me here because she believed in something more important than her own survival." The Kethmori warrior dropped silently into the crystal bowl, his massive form moving with predatory grace. Up close, he was even more impressive, nearly 3 meters of living weapon, every line of his body designed for efficient killing. His claws gleamed like polished metal in the triple sunlight. But instead of attacking, Kalor circled Evelyn, slowly studying her from every angle. His movements were those of a predator evaluating potential prey, but there was something else in his manner, a recognition that she might be something more than just another soft-skinned alien. "You trapped the metal fangs without killing them," Kalor said, finally, his voice like grinding stone mixed with distant thunder. "You showed mercy to creatures that would have devoured you without hesitation. Explain this strange behavior." The fact that he spoke at all was significant. The Kethmori had maintained absolute silence during previous contact attempts, communicating only through violence. But something about Evelyn's actions had earned her the right to speak with one of their warriors. "On my world," Evelyn said carefully, "the greatest hunters know when not to kill. A true predator takes only what it needs and respects the prey that makes it strong. Destroying everything you encounter isn't hunting, it's just waste." Kalor made a sound that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. Your world makes small hunters with large thoughts. I am Kalor the Fang Bearer. I have ended starships and crushed armies. Yet I watch you defeat 8 metal fangs without spilling blood, and I find myself curious. He stopped directly in front of her, looming over her small form like a mountain of living shadow. The sky dwellers above send messages of trade and alliance. They speak of strength and technology and mutual benefit, but they understand nothing of the hunt. They think like prey animals, always seeking safety in numbers, always depending on tools instead of skill. Kalor extended one massive claw toward Evelyn's face. For a moment, she thought he was about to kill her. Instead, the claw gently touched her forehead, a gesture that carried weight and meaning in Kethmori culture. But you, he continued, you think differently. You led the metal fangs into a trap, using the land itself as your weapon. You fought without seeking to kill, which is the hardest kind of fighting. You showed Theore. Theore, Evelyn asked. The strength that comes from choosing not to use strength, Kalor explained. It is the mark of a true apex predator. The weak kill because they must. The strong kill because they can. But the wise know when killing serves no purpose. Above them, the hidden Kethmori observers moved closer to the edge of the crystal formations. They had been watching this entire encounter through senses far more sophisticated than simple vision. They could smell the chemical changes in Evelyn's body that indicated genuine grief for her lost companion. They could hear the micro-variations in her voice that suggested honesty rather than deception. Most importantly, they had observed her behavior during the hunt. Every choice she made had demonstrated intelligence, patience, and restraint, the qualities they valued most in their own species. Back on Helios Bastion, the command center was in chaos. Long-range sensors had detected the electromagnetic pulse from Sarah's beacon, followed by an ominous silence from the surface of Valdris Prime. Dr. Marcus Reed stood before the main display screen, his face pale with worry. "That was definitely an emergency beacon," he said to the assembled representatives. "But we're not receiving any communication from either shuttle." Commander Therok's massive frame shifted restlessly in his oversized chair. "I told you this would happen. Humans are too weak for missions like this. Now we've lost 2 of them to these creatures." "Wait. Doctor," Lyrix interrupted her crystalline form, brightening with excitement. "The long-range sensors are detecting movement on the surface, multiple heat signatures near the landing site." The main screen activated, showing a distant view of Valdris Prime's crystal landscape. The image was unclear due to atmospheric interference, but they could make out several large forms moving among the crystal formations. "Kethmori?" Roth Moran asked, his scarred face twisted with anticipation. "How many At least a dozen." Dr. Lyrix replied, studying the sensor data. "Possibly more. They're converging on the area where the humans landed." Commander Therok stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the deck plating. "That settles it. We mount a rescue operation immediately. Full military force, overwhelming firepower. We'll show these creatures what happens when they threaten galactic unity." "No," Dr. Marcus Reed said firmly. "That's exactly what Evelyn was trying to avoid. If we respond with violence, we'll prove to the Kethmori that we're just another aggressive species trying to intimidate them." "Then what do you suggest?" Therok demanded. "That we wait here while these monsters pick our people apart." Before Marcus could answer, the communication array activated again. The main screen flickered, showing a new image that made every being in the room fall silent. It was Evelyn, very much alive, standing next to a massive Kethmori warrior. The creature's claws were clearly visible, gleaming in the alien sunlight, but they weren't raised in threat. Instead, the warrior stood in what could only be described as a protective posture, as if guarding the small human from harm. "This is Evelyn Hart calling Helios Bastion." Her voice came through clearly, though there was something different in her tone, a confidence that hadn't been there before. "I need to speak with the Council immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." The assembled representatives stared at the screen in stunned disbelief. Not only was the human alive, but she appeared to be communicating with one of the most feared predators in known space. "How is this possible?" Dr. Lyrix whispered, her crystal form dimming with shock. On the screen, the Kethmori warrior moved slightly, bringing his massive head into view. When he spoke, His grinding voice filled the command center with predatory authority. "I am Kalor the Fang Bearer. I speak for the hunting packs of Valdris Prime. We have tested this small hunter and found her worthy of respect. She has earned the right to speak for her pack." Commander Therok's yellow eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible. The Kethmori have never acknowledged any species as equals. What kind of test could a human possibly pass?" Kalor's 6 red eyes seemed to stare directly through the screen at the Vraxian commander. "The test of understanding large flesh. The test of knowing when strength should be used and when it should be held in check. Your warrior's mind thinks only of crushing enemies. This small hunter's mind understands the art of the perfect hunt." The transmission continued for several more minutes, with Evelyn explaining what had happened on the surface and what it might mean for future relations between the Kethmori and the Galactic community. But the most significant moment came at the end, when Kalor made an announcement that would change everything. "I name you Silent Fang," the massive warrior said, his claw touching Evelyn's shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You hunt with the mind of an apex predator, even though your body is that of prey. You are no longer just small flesh. You are Kethmori kin." The title sent shockwaves through the watching aliens. In the entire recorded history of the galaxy, no non-Kethmori had ever been acknowledged as kin by the apex predators. The days following Evelyn's return to Helios Bastion were unlike anything in galactic history. The space station had become a chaotic hub as representatives from every major species tried to understand the implications of humanity's new alliance with the Kethmori. Evelyn stood in her quarters looking out at the vast expanse of space where Kethmori bioships now moved alongside the station's standard vessels. The alien craft looked more like living creatures than machines, with hulls that seemed to shift and flow as they traveled through the void. Dr. Marcus Reed entered, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "How are you holding up? I know losing Sarah was—" "She made her choice," Evelyn interrupted, though her voice carried the weight of grief. "Sarah understood what was at stake better than any of us. She gave her life so that humanity could have this chance." Marcus nodded slowly. "The Council wants to debrief you again. They still can't believe what happened down there." "Let them think what they want," Evelyn replied. "The proof is sitting right outside their windows. Kalor and his pack didn't have to return with me. They're here because they choose to be." As if summoned by her words, the door chimed. Kalor himself entered, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Kethmori warrior had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the human-scaled ceiling. "Silent Fang," he rumbled, using the title he had given her on Valdris Prime. "The pack leaders wish to speak with you. There are matters that require the wisdom of kin." Dr. Marcus Reed tensed involuntarily at the warrior's presence. Even knowing that Kalor was here as an ally, every human instinct screamed danger when confronted with a 3-meter-tall apex predator. They made their way to the main conference room, where assembled representatives waited in tense silence. The circular table had been modified to accommodate Kethmori physiology, with several seats removed to make room for the visiting warriors. 3 Kethmori pack leaders sat alongside the human delegation, their alien forms creating stark contrast to the other species present. Commander Therok looked distinctly uncomfortable, his usual confidence shaken by proximity to creatures he had only known through terrified combat reports. Admiral Victoria Chen, who had arrived from Earth Command to handle diplomatic implications, addressed the situation directly. She was Evelyn's superior in the Terran Defense Force, a woman known for strategic brilliance and unflinching honesty. "The Kethmori have made it clear that they're interested in alliance with humanity specifically. What we need to understand is why and what this means for the rest of the galactic community." Kalor spoke for his kind, his grinding voice filling the chamber with predatory authority. "For generations, we have watched the Sky Dwellers war among themselves. They fight over territory, resources, ideology, but they do not understand the true nature of conflict." He gestured toward Commander Therok with one massive claw. "Your Vraxian fleets believe that victory comes from superior firepower. You build larger ships, heavier armor, more devastating weapons. But you cannot defeat an enemy by destroying everything in your path." His attention shifted to Dr. Lyrix. "Your Nexari seek to avoid conflict through complex negotiations and technological solutions. You believe that intelligence alone can prevent war. But you do not understand that some enemies cannot be reasoned with. Finally, his gaze settled on Rothmarin. Your Gorian berserkers embrace violence as an end in itself. You believe that fury and aggression can overcome any obstacle. But rage without wisdom is merely destruction. The other Kethmori pack leaders nodded in agreement, their alien features impossible to read, but their body language suggesting approval of Kalor's assessment. Humans, Kalor continued, understand something the rest of you have forgotten. They know that the greatest victory is the one that requires no killing. They have the patience to wait for the perfect moment, the wisdom to choose their battles, and the courage to sacrifice themselves for something greater than individual survival. Admiral Chen leaned forward, her strategic mind working on the implications. You're talking about Sarah Monroe's sacrifice, but surely you don't judge an entire species based on one individual's actions. Another pack leader spoke up, her voice like wind through stone caverns. We have studied your histories, Earth Leader. Your species conquered a world full of predators larger than themselves. You survived ice ages that killed most other life. You crossed void oceans in vessels of wood and metal, seeking new hunting grounds. The third pack leader added, most importantly, you understand that strength without restraint is merely brutality. Your greatest warriors write codes of honor. You tend your prey animals instead of hunting them to extinction. You are apex predators with wisdom. Commander Tharok couldn't contain himself any longer. This is completely unacceptable. The humans cannot speak for the entire Galactic Defense Force. These negotiations must be handled by proper authorities with appropriate military oversight. Kalor's response was swift and decisive. Moving faster than any of the aliens could track, he appeared beside Tharok and placed one razor-sharp claw against the Vraxian commander's throat, not breaking the skin, but making his point absolutely clear. You still think like prey, the Kethmori warrior said with quiet menace. You speak of your militaries as if they could force us to accept terms we dislike. Shall I remind you what happened to the last fleet that threatened Kethmori space? The room fell dead silent. Everyone present knew the story of the hegemony fleet that had tried to invade Kethmori territory 50 years ago. 300 warships had entered their space. None had returned. The small deaths will speak for themselves, Kalor continued, stepping back from the terrified Vraxian. If their pack leaders on Earth wish to send proper negotiators, we will listen. But we will not waste time with prey thinkers who believe strength comes from the size of their fleets, instead of the wisdom of their choices. Dr. Lyrix's crystalline form flickered with patterns of desperate calculation. Even if we accept that the Kethmori prefer dealing with humans, there must be proper procedures. Treaties, trade agreements, defense pacts. These things require governmental approval and legal frameworks. Admiral Chen spoke carefully, aware that every word could have galactic implications. The Terran Defense Force is prepared to negotiate on behalf of the species that have chosen to work with us. However, we're not interested in forcing anyone into an alliance they don't want. She looked around the room at the assembled representatives. The Kethmori have made their position clear. They'll work with humanity because they believe we understand their values. If other species want to be part of that alliance, they'll need to demonstrate that they share those same values. Rothmaran's scarred face twisted with frustration. What values, weakness humans are the smallest, most fragile species in this room? What could they possibly teach warriors like us? It was Evelyn who answered, rising from her seat to address the room. The difference between strength and power, she said quietly. Between hunting and killing. Between winning a battle and ending a war. She activated a holographic display showing recent intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. While we've been arguing about who gets to negotiate with the Kethmori, the real threat has been growing stronger. The unknown enemy that started this galactic war isn't going to wait for us to sort out our political differences. The display showed star charts marked with red zones where entire systems had gone silent. Ships, space stations, even planets had simply vanished without sending distress signals or leaving debris fields. Whatever was destroying them was methodical, efficient, and utterly ruthless. This enemy doesn't care about our treaties or our traditional diplomatic solutions, Evelyn continued. They're not interested in territory or resources. They're systematically eliminating everything in their path, and every day we spend arguing is another day they get closer to the core worlds. Kaylor moved to stand beside her, his massive presence lending weight to her words. The silent Fang speaks truth. We have encountered this enemy at the edges of our hunting grounds. They are not like any prey we have known. They think like hive mind killers, showing no fear, no mercy, no individual thought. But they can be defeated, added the female pack leader. Not through overwhelming force or clever negotiations. They can be defeated by hunters who understand that the perfect kill requires patience, intelligence, and the wisdom to strike at exactly the right moment. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. The galaxy's most feared predators had just acknowledged that there was something out there even more dangerous than themselves, something that could only be defeated through the kind of strategic thinking that humanity had demonstrated. Commander Tharok looked around the room, his yellow eyes reflecting a growing understanding of the situation. You're saying that this alliance isn't about politics at all. It's about survival. Everything is about survival, Kaylor replied. The question is whether you understand what survival really means. It's not about being the strongest or the most heavily armed. It's about being smart enough to choose the right battles and wise enough to know when those battles are over. Admiral Chen stood her decision made. Earth Command authorizes full military cooperation with the Kethmori Alliance. Any species that wants to join us is welcome, provided they understand that this is about ending a threat to all sentient life. She looked directly at each of the alien representatives. But make no mistake, this is humanity's alliance with the Kethmori. We're not asking for permission, and we're not interested in committee decisions. If you want to be part of this, you follow our lead. If not, you're on your own. The transformation was complete. In the span of weeks, humanity had gone from being the galaxy's most underestimated species to its most crucial ally. The small, fragile humans had earned the respect of apex predators and gained access to military capabilities that could reshape the balance of power across known space. 6 months after first contact on Valdris Prime, the space around the crystal planet looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships moved alongside Kethmori biovessels in perfect formation, their different technologies working together in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. Admiral Victoria Chen stood on the bridge of the UE's Persistence, watching the joint patrol through the observation deck. The massive warship had been humanity's pride before the Alliance, but now it seemed almost quaint compared to the living vessels that moved alongside it like loyal pack animals. Lieutenant Commander Park Jiho looked up from his station. 17 more requests for Alliance membership in the past week, Admiral. The Nexari Collective, 3 independent Vraxian colonies, and most surprisingly, the Gorian defense clans. Chen smiled slightly. The same species that laughed at us 6 months ago are now desperate for our protection. The bridge door opened and Evelyn entered with Kaylor close behind. The massive Kethmori warrior had become a permanent fixture aboard human ships, serving as both liaison and tactical advisor. Sister Alatsparisi, Evelyn greeted Chen with a nod of respect. The morning patrol found something you need to see. Good news or bad news? Chen asked. Unknown contact at the edge of the system, Kaylor rumbled. Single vessel massive energy signature heading directly toward inhabited space. The main display activated, showing long-range sensor data from the patrol. The contact was indeed massive, easily twice the size of the largest ship in the combined fleet. Its hull reflected sensor waves in patterns that suggested technology completely unlike anything in the Galactic database. Energy readings? Chen asked. Off the charts, Lieutenant Park replied. Whatever powers that thing, it's not fusion or antimatter. The energy signature is completely unknown. Evelyn studied the data with the analytical mind that had first earned Kethmori respect. Trajectory analysis suggests it's not exploring randomly. It knows exactly where it's going. The enemy, Kaylor stated with certainty. The hive mind killers we have tracked at the edges of space. Finally, they come where we can face them properly. Admiral Chen felt a chill despite the bridge's comfortable temperature. This was what they had been preparing for, the unknown threat that had been systematically destroying everything in its path for months. Time to intercept, Chen asked. 4 hours at maximum speed. Lieutenant Park responded. But Admiral, our scouts report that the alien vessel isn't alone. Long-range scans show at least 6 smaller contacts following it. A fleet, Chen said grimly. They're not just exploring anymore. This is an invasion force. the communications array activated, connecting them to other ships in the joint fleet. Commander Tharok's massive form appeared on screen, his Vraxian features tense with anticipation. "We're detecting the same contacts," Tharok reported. "My tactical analysis suggests this is a probe in force. They're testing our defenses before committing their main fleet." Dr. Lyric's voice chimed with electronic harmonics. "The energy readings are completely unprecedented. Whatever technology they're using, it's beyond our current understanding. Our standard weapons may not be effective." "Then we don't use standard tactics," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the growing tension. "This is exactly why the Alliance exists. We combine human strategic thinking with Kethmori hunting instincts." She activated the tactical display, showing a three-dimensional map of the local system. Her mind was already working on the problem, analyzing terrain and positioning like she had done with the metal wolves on Veldris Prime. "The enemy is coming at us in a straight line," she continued. "They're confident in their superiority, which means they're not expecting resistance that requires strategic thinking." Kaylor's 6 red eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "Like prey animals that have never faced true hunters. They think size and strength are all that matter." The next hour was a masterclass in military coordination. The joint human Kethmori fleet spread out across the system, positioning themselves to look like a desperate last stand around the inhabited worlds. To external sensors, it would appear that they were clustering their forces in a classic defensive formation. But appearances were deceiving. Hidden among asteroid fields and debris zones, smaller squadrons of bioships waited in perfect concealment. Kethmori vessels had the ability to mask their energy signatures, almost completely making them invisible to most sensor systems. The human ships, meanwhile, began broadcasting false telemetry that made their fleet appear larger and more densely packed than it actually was. "Remember," Admiral Chen addressed the combined fleet, "we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're executing a hunt. Patience, coordination, and perfect timing." The enemy fleet arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The lead vessel was even more imposing up close, a massive construct of unknown materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "They're scanning us," Lieutenant Park reported. "Multiple sensor sweeps, very thorough. They're cataloging our defensive positions." "Let them look," Evelyn said calmly. "The more confident they become, the better this works." The enemy fleet began its approach, moving in perfect formation toward the inhabited worlds. Their technology was clearly superior to anything the galaxy had seen before: energy shields that deflected probe shots without apparent effort, propulsion systems that generated no detectable emissions. But they were also predictable. Just as Evelyn had anticipated, the alien fleet focused entirely on the obvious threat: the massed human and allied ships defending the planets. They showed no interest in scanning the apparently empty space around asteroid fields or debris zones. "They're communicating," Dr. Lyrics reported. "The transmissions are encrypted, but the pattern suggests tactical coordination. They're preparing for a standard engagement." "Then let's give them one they'll never forget," Admiral Chen said. "All ships execute Fang Pattern Alpha." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations. The human-led alliance didn't try to match the enemy's superior firepower. Instead, they used the aliens' confidence against them. As I'd already stated, the main fleet engaged the enemy, directly drawing their attention and making them commit to a frontal assault. While the unknown aliens focused on crushing what they saw as a conventional defense, they never noticed the Kethmori bioships emerging from concealment behind them. The attack came from 6 different directions simultaneously. Kethmori vessels struck with surgical precision, targeting specific systems, rather than trying to destroy the enemy ships outright. They disabled propulsion communications and weapon systems with the efficiency of natural predators taking down large prey. The enemy fleet found itself trapped and isolated, cut off from each other, and unable to coordinate their superior technology effectively. What should have been an easy victory became a nightmare of confusion and systematic dismantlement. "Target their command vessel," Kaylor advised from his position at the tactical station. "Remove the pack leader, and the rest will struggle to adapt." Human precision-guided weapons working in coordination with Kethmori bioship attacks focused on the massive lead vessel. Unlike the smaller escorts, this ship didn't fall quickly. Its technology was too advanced, its defenses too sophisticated. But it didn't matter. The real victory wasn't in destroying the enemy fleet, It was improving that they could be defeated. For months, these unknown aliens had seemed unstoppable, systematically eliminating everything in their path. Now, for the first time, they had been outmaneuvered and outfought. More importantly, they had been forced to retreat. The surviving enemy vessels disengaged from the battle and fled toward the edge of the system, their formation broken and their apparent invincibility shattered. They would return certainly, but they would return knowing that the galaxy contained predators capable of hunting them. In the aftermath of the battle, the space around Valdris Prime filled with messages of congratulation and requests for alliance from across the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity months before now recognized them as the key to survival against an existential threat. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Persistence watching as the joint fleet regrouped and began recovery operations. Beside her, Evelyn and Kaylor reviewed tactical data from the engagement, already planning for the next encounter. "Sister," Evelyn said quietly, "Sarah would have been proud of what we accomplished here." "She would have," Chen agreed. "Her sacrifice made all of this possible. Without her courage on Valdris Prime, we never would have gained Kethmori trust." Kaylor's massive head turned toward them, his alien features as unreadable as ever. But when he spoke, his voice carried a warmth that was unmistakably affection. "The bright sacrifice is remembered," he rumbled, using the Kethmori name for Sarah Monroe. "Her courage echoes in the songs of the hunt. She is kinsworn to the Fang bearers for all time." Months later, on Valdris Prime itself, a new monument was erected among the crystal formations where everything had begun. Carved from the living crystal of the planet, it showed a small human figure standing alongside towering Kethmori warriors, their forms intertwined in a pattern that spoke of brotherhood and shared purpose. The inscription, written in both human script and Kethmori runes, was simple but profound. "In memory of Sarah Monroe, the bright sacrifice whose courage opened the path between worlds. In honor of Evelyn Hart the Silent Fang, who proved that true strength comes from wisdom rather than power. In celebration of the alliance that showed the galaxy that the smallest voice can speak with the authority of legends." Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the monument representatives from species that had once mocked humanity's weakness and fragility. They came to understand how the galaxy's most underestimated species had become its most crucial protectors. The monument stood as a reminder that in a universe full of predators, the most dangerous hunters were those who understood that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary, and when mercy was the harder, more powerful choice. The Silent Fang had spoken, and the galaxy would never be the same. The greatest stories aren't just about heroes who win, they're about ordinary people who choose to become extraordinary when everything depends on their courage. If this tale of humanity's rise from mockery to legendary status inspired you, if you felt the power of intelligence over strength and wisdom over fury, then share this journey with others who believe that even the smallest among us can change the fate of the universe. Like this video if you believe in the power of the underestimated. Subscribe for more sci-fi stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit, and let us know in the comments. What would you do if the galaxy's survival depended on proving that your greatest weakness was actually your ultimate strength? The hunt for truth, courage, and hope continues. Will you join us for the next adventure?